Okay, so welcome to Living Light. So let me introduce you to Terry Nieves. So Terry Nieves is the Garden Enhanced Nutrition Education Coordinator for Mendocino County Schools and a seaweeder harvester who is part of the Ocean Harvest Sea Vegetables Collective. She is passionate about bringing raw, wild, live food to people and believes that engaging the senses through food is one of the best ways to learn. She has been an educator for over 25 years and is now changing the world through food. She is an avid ocean protector and encourages everyone to get involved in protecting the oceans through their daily action. So please welcome Terry Nieves.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm pleased to be here, and my assistant today will be Chris DeMarcus. She's from San Diego, and she is a recent graduate of Living Light Culinary Institute, so she is now a certified raw food chef, gourmet chef. Yes. So thank you, Chris, and thank you to all the staff. Made it really easy to come out here and do this. I'm very new at this, never done this before, so bear with me, please. Today I'm going to introduce a seaweed salad to you that is one of my favorites. It's very easy to make. You don't have to have all of the ingredients to go ahead and make it. The seaweed's very important to put in there. But I have some various other things to put in there today that I've made with seaweed as well. I have a seaweed sauerkraut that'll go in there. And I'd like to just start today by telling you that I was really inspired by the words last night of Will Tuttle and by Howard Lyman and John Robbins, and telling us all that we're the ones, and we need to make sure that we walk and speak and tell our truths. And part of seaweed harvesting is that for me as well. There are several things about seaweeds and the ocean that are going on right now that I'm definitely politically involved with. Several of you I know live on the North Coast, and the Marine Life Protection Act is going into effect along the California coast. It's a great thing. And I hope that they do it right, because if it's not done right, it will end up cutting off our commons for our common use of the ocean. So gathering food, gathering driftwood, anything that you want to be doing out in the ocean. We just need to make sure that we keep the process open and transparent, and that we really make sure that they're doing it for the right reasons. So that's my little spiel about the ocean. I'm also very grateful to Sherry and Dan for having this event. I've been here every year since it started. In fact, I was at the Raw Food Festival in Oregon when they used to have those, and that's where I met Sherry. And I've continued to be involved every year with the festival, and I've continued to become more and more raw myself. So starting in January, I actually had a raw food chef come and live with me for a while, and she was able to get me pretty clean, and my diet's continued that way ever since, and it feels great. It helps me think a little clearer so that I can get up here and talk with you. And so I'd really like to thank Sherry and Dan for bringing Living Light to the working person's town of Fort Bragg. I think it's a great place, and they offer a tremendous amount of support to the community to be as vibrant as we possibly can here in Mendocino County. And then the last being, I call a being that I'd like to share my gratitude with, is the ocean. And the ocean gives us the seaweed and the fish, if you go out there and fish, for free. I mean, it's not anything that you have to go out there and plant a garden or, do something for a really long time to be able to get something from the ocean. It's just wild out there, and we have one of the richest nutrient upwellings in the world in Mendocino County. That's why we have so much seaweed out there. There are at least 10 different types that Ocean Harvest harvests, but there are 1,500 types of seaweed that are eaten throughout the world, and at least 16,000 types that grow. So it's a really big, unexplored food source, and I think that in the coming years it'll become more and more a part of people's diets, because we'll realize the value of the nutrients that come from the seaweeds. As you all know, organic foods grown on the land are the best, and actually I'll take that one step back, because wild foods that grow on the land and in the ocean are really the best. They have if you think of it as like a lock with a key, the key for the wild foods opens up the lock. You don't have to jiggle it or anything. The key for the organic foods, you wiggle it a little bit, it can open up the lock. Keys for conventional foods, you're going to have to wiggle out a lot to be able to open up locks in your body to make sure that you get the energy that you need from the foods. So I'm grateful for the ocean and her abundance and the nurturing food that comes from the ocean. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about seaweeds before I get started on the recipe, because it's not going to take very long. Chris and I work back there getting everything ready, so it's already all chopped up, pretty much. The seaweed that we're going to be using today in the sea love salad is called silky sea palm. And it is the juvenile sea palm plant. Its Latin name is Postelsia palmiformis. And it really does look like a palm tree in the ocean. It looks like a green palm tree, but it's actually a brown seaweed. There are 3 types of seaweeds, brown, green, and red. They all have different nutrient compositions. The brown ones are definitely the most medicinal. They carry what's called in them sodium alginate, a lot of it. So that sodium alginate actually binds with heavy metals and toxins in your body and helps you to eliminate those. So if you're doing some kind of a heavy metal cleanse, it's a really good idea to take seaweeds along with that. The sea palm that we call silky sea palm, and the reason it's called silky sea palm, once we harvest this plant, we harvest in April and early part of May, and then that season is done for the silky sea palm. It's the juvenile plant. The ocean is amazing because these plants grow they start in probably the end of March and they're done by August. They're all perennials. Most of them live from 1 to 2 years. There's one out there called ocean ribbons that lives for up to 17 years, which is kind of amazing to think about how long that stipe has been out there. And the stipe is like the stem, and you can actually hold on to that if you get knocked out in the ocean, maybe on a wave, try to find a piece of seaweed to hang on to. But the silky sea palm, the reason we call it silky is when we take it inland to dry it, we take it out of our bags and then you start spreading it on big net tables about as big as this table, and it feels like silk underneath your hands. It's really amazing. And there's one of my friends, John Llewellyn, who owns Mendocino Sea Vegetable Company, told me this year, oh, now I know why you call it silky sea palm, because he had harvested some really early. And it feels really silky and different than it does the adult plant. So we harvest it again later in the season, and we call that regular sea palm without the silky at the beginning. So this particular recipe calls for silky sea palm, and I'll just go ahead and start with the recipe. I like to crunch it up just a little bit. It comes very small, so you can see what it looks like. But then the first thing that you need to do is make sure that you soak it, so you rehydrate it, and crunch it up. And the recipe calls for a 1/2 ounce, and some of this in the very bottom is already crunched, so I'm just going to pour it in there. And I like to use just a little bit of water, because then it soaks all the water into it, and then you don't have any water left over. And if you do have water left over, you can either drink it, or use it in a raw soup, or use it in any kind of a broth. However you'd like to use it, because there are nutrients in there. All of the trace minerals are in there. Seaweeds have 60 trace elements in them, more than any land plant. They have 13 vitamins and 20 amino acids. So that'll soak up while we're sitting here waiting, and it'll go back to its brown regular color, even though out there on the rocks it looks green. And the other thing that is also done ahead of time is to soak some sun-dried tomatoes, 1/3 cup of sun-dried tomatoes. So, and Chris will be demonstrating how to cut those. She's going to be doing all the knife skills today. Okay, so I'm going to add a fresh chopped tomato. And guess what? That's the one thing I didn't get. That's one. Yes. Add fresh chopped tomato. And it's just chopped into pieces so that they're easy to eat. And then these are the sun-dried tomatoes, so I'll have Chris go ahead and demonstrate this. I have not been to Living Light to any classes, so I do not have these knife skills. We're probably going to add all of the ones in that jar. Okay. And then I'm also going to be using some chopped kale, very finely chopped. Chris, could you bring that out as well? I've got a half of a red bell pepper that we chopped ahead of time. This is really a beautiful salad. It's green and red and yellow. And then 3 tablespoons of sauerkraut. Now this is the sauerkraut that I made ahead of time. I call it sea chi. And I didn't put any spices in it. I usually make it really hot, but I didn't want to add any spice to this particular dish. So this has several things in it. I like to eat burdock. It's one of my favorite vegetables to eat. And I thought, when you're eating burdock raw, it really doesn't taste all that great. So I put it in my sauerkraut, and it's great. So I have some burdock and some carrots and some sea palm. I put the regular size sea palm in here because I did experiment with the silky sea palm, and it kind of disintegrated into my chi. So I did this larger size of sea palm, and it seems to be doing well in here. I put some dulse in as well, and you can see it's pink. And then several different other things that you would put into a sauerkraut. So there I have, how much does it say on there that I have? 3 tablespoons of sauerkraut. And then I have a clove of garlic, and this one's minced very finely. And of course, once you experiment with it, you can decide how much garlic you want in it. I wanted to make it not very spicy. 1/3 of a cup of hemp seeds. And I already chopped up 8 to 10 oil-cured olives. These add a real nice pizzazz to it. And then Chris has just about got our sun-dried tomatoes, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. And you can either add this after, or you can put it in your soaking water. You can soak the silky sea palm in it. I'm adding it afterwards, but I have soaked it with my water before. And it gives the sea palm just a little bit of a different flavor, more of a lemony flavor. And then we're using some tamari, just a dash of tamari. We don't need very much of a salty flavor because the sea palm will add that. And then Chris is going to be busier than I am because she's going to chop up an avocado and show you how to do the avocado. And while she's chopping that, I'll tell you some more things about the seaweed. The silky sea palm we harvest, I told you, in about April through the beginning of May. Our entire harvest season only lasts from April through the beginning of August. And we harvest during the new and the full moon. Those are when the tides are negative in the summertime. And we go out usually at dawn. So I get up, I live about 50 minutes from the coast inland where I can dry, where it's nice and hot. I get up, get my whatever I'm going to do, my smoothie ready, or maybe the night before, because I have to get up at 4 in order to get to the coast by 5:30. And that's usually when the sun starts coming up. And we head out with a wheelbarrow and bags, big net bags. They kind of look like gigantic lingerie bags. And we have a grape harvester's knife that has a little hook on it that we use. And we walk out to wherever our place is. I have about 7 or 8 different spots where we harvest. Most of them are state parks, so they're free access. Anybody can go out there and harvest. If you're interested in harvesting, all you need is a fishing license. And if you have a fishing license, you can harvest any of the sea palms, up to 10 pounds wet a day, except for the sea palm. The sea palm is the only one that's regulated, and that's because it only grows here in the whole world. It grows from about Big Sur up to the Washington border. And it's probably the most prolific right here. It grows on almost every rock you look out in the ocean. In fact, there's a low tide this evening about 7:30, 8 o'clock. If you get a chance to go out to a tide pool at McCarraker, you can go out and see some of the seaweeds out there. So after we harvest, we bring in probably about 40 pounds of seaweed.
When you harvest, do you wade out, or is it washed up on shore?
No, it's not washed up on shore. We do sometimes get in the water, but mostly the tide's out so much that we just walk on the rocks, same place where the mussels are always growing, and everything's still alive. We harvest it fresh. We blade tip harvest, so we just cut the blade tips. We never cut the stipes because that's cutting off the reproductive, the way that it can reproduce. So when you do cut the blade tips, then you're opening up the tips so the spores come out. So it actually is helpful to harvest some of these seaweeds because we go back the next year and there are even more where we harvested before. There are 3 larger companies, and then there are several small people that are doing startups, but I don't ever see anybody in the places that I go. Mostly I see abalone divers. They're out there at the same time, same places. Yes. There's one that has an acid, I can't remember what the name of it is right away, that you would taste right away when you put it on your tongue. And it's the only one that I've heard is poisonous. Yeah. You can taste all of the seaweeds, but not all of them taste good. Yeah. So Chris is demonstrating how to cut up an avocado. I could learn something, yes. Yes.
The first ingredient, the bright red, is that a pepper or?
Yes, that was a pepper. There is a tomato in the recipe. I forgot to cut it up. So my assistant's going to be even busier than I am. I'm going to ask her to go get 2 leaves of kale and 1 tomato, please, because we will still need to cut those. And as you can see, the seaweed is soaking up the water. It'll probably soak all of it up before I add it in. And then I'll just kind of drain a little bit of the water out. Okay, so after we harvest, I'll continue to tell you the harvest story while she's getting the rest of the ingredients. We take the seaweed inland, and the ocean is really amazing when we're out there. I just have to tell you that's the best part of the whole job. That is it. Just being in the ocean, feeling all of those negative ions out there. And you can actually breathe in the iodine and the minerals that are out there in the breeze or in the fog, whatever might be out there that day. Usually I can't wait till the sun comes out because it's so cold out there, and I have gloves on and a wetsuit and a wool hat and a wool jacket, and I try to get as warm as I can. But once you get wet, get your feet wet, your temperature drops a little bit. So I sing a little bit like, oh, where's the sun? Here comes the sun. And you can see it come up over some of the cliffs. Many of the places where we harvest are cliffs, so the sun is blocked until it starts to come up over. And then we go inland. It takes about 50 minutes to get back. We have these great big hemp tarps that Heather down at Acorn Organics made for us one year while I was here. Cover it up, get it in buckets, and then take it out of the truck and lay it out on big net screens. And I have about 30 tables this size out in the middle of the forest in a great big opening, bigger than this room, where it dries. And it takes all day for the first dry cycle. So you have to have sun. So it's really tricky. At the night before you go harvest, you have to listen to the weather radio. You have to make sure there's going to be sun tomorrow. You have to make sure the waves aren't going to be too big. You have to make sure there's not a big swell. You have to make sure that they say it's not a warning on the ocean. And then when you get it inland, you have to make sure there's enough sun so that you can dry it. We dry it all day until we don't have any more sun. It doesn't attract any flies. No. Or birds. We once in a while see the local lizards pop their heads up on the corners of the table and do little push-ups, but they never go on the seaweed. Mm-hmm. I think it might be because it's decomposing already. The stuff that you see the flies on, yeah. This is just dried so quickly that I don't see anything. No, that's okay. You can leave the seeds in. And then we spread it out as thin as we can, especially like the silky. And then when we pick it up, we put it in sheets. So when I go to the laundry to do my sheets, people think I'm a body worker, not a seaweed harvester. So I have all these sheets, and we wrap them up like a mummy bag, tie them at both ends, take it inside where it's dry, and keep it overnight. And then we set it out again the next day. And that's how we're able to get it crispy. It's a double-day drying process. Most of the seaweeds need at least 2 days to dry. You can stabilize the seaweed if you go out and harvest and it's not sunny enough, but it's just a little bit sunny, and you get it kind of a leathery texture. That's called stabilized, and it'll wait for another day to dry, but you can't bring it in wet because it starts to decompose and it'll start coming off on your fingers, this green slimy stuff. Yes. Yes. Well, we don't go out for that cycle. We miss a cycle. There are probably about 40 days, 40 good days between April and August where we can go out. And we probably hit about 35 of them. So we have to really pay attention to every part of it, all the elements. Yeah. And the new and the full moon, when I say that, I mean like maybe 2 days before, the day of, and 2 days after. So it's about a 5-day cycle. And that's enough physically. That's all I can do physically, get up that many days and do the same thing. And I also actually have another job, so this one is truly a moonlighting job for me. Yeah, and then we store it in great big bags. You may have seen me running around the Expo. I've been carrying some in big bags because we've been selling it so quickly down there. And then package it in smaller bags. And we're getting new labels soon. I'm really excited. I sell 10 different types of seaweed that come from the coast here, and then make some different products. 7 seaweed sprinkle. It has all the red. It has the red, green, and brown seaweeds in it. You can use it on everything. We have one called Sea Whip. This has been really popular. Actually, we sold out at the Expo. There are a few bags of the small Sea Whip down there, and I'll just pass this around. Maybe you could taste some. This is the bullwhip kelp frond. The bullwhip kelp is the big bulb that you see tons of it out there. Most of it you can't reach. And then we harvest just the frond tips. And we actually only harvest, we call it pigtails. It has 2 pigtails. If you've ever looked at the end of the frond tips, we harvest one of those off and leave the other one. And the bullwhip kelp reproduces by spores like all seaweeds, but it starts to lose patches of it. They turn dark green and it starts to lose those. Those are the spores. They're dropping down into the bottom of the ocean to reproduce. And you had a question. You can store it. You can either keep it in plastic, but I recommend putting it in a glass jar with a lid in the dark. You don't want it to be in the sun. It sweats. It likes the sun and it likes the moist air because it'll soak it all up. Yes?
You don't live here, but around the West, what do you look for to find a good place to harvest rocks? What about like Washington outside of Seattle?
You would need to look for some rocks that have seaweed growing all over them. And then you're going to need to taste them and see if you like the taste of it. And there are several people there. I know Ryan Drum lives up in Washington area, and our friends James and Carrie Jungworth, who have Nature Spirit Herbs, live in Oregon. So if you're able to, contact with somebody to see, maybe even take a picture, and you can email it to me even and say, hey, what's this seaweed? If you're curious. And I do have a website. It's ohsv.net. Ocean Harvest Sea Vegetables. ohsv.net. Yes. Yes. And we have some order forms down at the table.
Okay, I'm on the East Coast, so I usually look at Maine Coast seaweed.
So you get East Coast seaweed.
Right. Is there a benefit, like if you're East Coast, you should really just pick your East Coast seaweed?
I would say, just because it's less of a carbon footprint to ship it all the way there. But if there's something you particularly like, I know that I trade with Maine Seaweed Company. We trade dulse for sea palm. Because there are many people here that like to eat dulse, and it's very rare to find it here. So we do a trade.
Since you're doing that trade, I could probably work from that, do better than you.
Yeah. Yes. In a Vitamix. And I use my container for dry ingredients. The one that has the blunt, instead of the sharp tips, it has blunt tips. But I'm sure you could use a regular Vitamix container. Yeah. I wanted to tell you some of the other constituents while Chris finishes cutting this up. Thank you very much. My website is ohsv.net. My email is ohveggies at pacific.net. ohveggies at pacific.net. Pacific. So nori is a red seaweed. There's a lot of nori out there. We harvest it in April, sometimes March. This is one that comes on very early and is usually found in places where there's a creek or a river somewhere nearby. This particular nori we got from Pudding Creek. That's one of the harvest spots. Excuse me. And we have a Seaweed Stewardship Alliance that all of the seaweed harvesters belong to, and we have all agreed not to harvest each other's spots, not to try to compete with each other at different markets, and it works out wonderfully. It's so wonderful not to be competitive. So the nori is high in protein and iron. It's a red seaweed. The kombu and the wakame are both brown seaweeds, and they are both, the wakame is highest in calcium of all of the seaweeds. The wakame is also being studied in Japan and other places in the world for breast cancer and for herpes treatment. It's an anti-herpes or an antiviral for herpes. Wonderful stuff coming out of wakame. And this grows around the world, just different. They're all in the same species, they're just a different genus. The kombu, you can bathe with seaweed too. If you don't like the taste of it and you still want to get the minerals, you can get them transdermally through your skin. So you put a piece in your bathtub, you get it all hot, you get in there, and it's wonderful. It doesn't feel slimy, but it feels kind of slippery like silk. Put it on, wash yourself, rinse yourself off. Just one piece. Like one 6-inch, 8-inch piece. It'll expand to about that big. Yeah. And both of these are very high in sodium alginate, the one nutrient that can bind with the heavy metals and excrete toxins from your body. Thank you. How would you use wakame? How much? You could just chew on it. It's really good for the respiratory system. I take a piece when I fly because it's good for before and after you get x-rays and also for all that radiation that we receive when we're up in the airplanes. Yeah. The kombu. It's probably the most difficult one to eat. I think if you soak it and maybe cut it into strips, you might be able to do something with it. So here's our kale, the first two ingredients that were on there, and the tomatoes. And then the last thing to add will be the silky sea palm. You want to drain it? Yeah. We'll drain it so that this doesn't get all mushy like soup. I usually like to add the avocados last so that they don't get mushy, but they're going to be fine. These are perfect avocados today. And do you have any other questions? Yes? Oh, well, when I moved to Mendocino County, I had been a teacher for, 15 years. I was a little burnt out. I didn't really want to teach. I lived out in Comchi, so anywhere I went was a far drive. Comchi is in the middle of almost nowhere, for those of you who live here or don't live here. So I was doing things part-time. I was doing a little bit of teaching, and then Betsy Holiday, her name is now Christy Holiday, had the business Ocean Harvest, and so I started packaging for her, and I started drying for her, and I did everything except harvest. And she happened to sell the business one day, and I wanted to buy it, so that's really what got me into it. Yes? Yes. And really all that means is I bought her list, the goodwill that comes with the company, the name, because you can't buy the harvest places. We just bought the understanding amongst all the other harvesters that the company was still in business and that I'd be harvesting. We have some wonderful spots, the headlands of Mendocino, Russian Gulch State Park, Pine Beach, beautiful place if you've never been out there. It's a little bit of a walk. It's right by the Pine Beach Motel. We go up to Virgin Creek. I don't know if you call that, but we call it Mermaid Lagoon. And then Pudding Creek is another one. And then we have a private residence that we go off of his backyard. It's really wonderful. Thank you. So the last ingredient to go in will be the silky sea foam. And this one's just a little bit different because this has curly kale in it. It makes it a little airier. It's not quite as moist. The one that you'll be tasting with the demos has the dino kale. Yes? Oh, yes, those are very controversial. I'm not sure where they get their seaweed from. I know that several people have tried calling them and emailing and trying to find out where those wonderful kelp noodles come from. Are they really seaweed? I think they are really seaweed. I don't know that they're really raw. I do know they're very processed because they said they scrape the green off to be able to get the clear. And I don't know any seaweed you can do that to. There might be one, but I'm not sure. Excuse me? I know, it does say that it's raw, but I don't know that they've ever told anybody in the raw community that I know really how they get that raw product. I haven't been able to get that information out of them. And people have asked me that because I sell seaweed. People at the health food store said, you know, a lot of people buy this. Would you find out if it's really raw? They're not going to tell me. But maybe somebody could find that out.
Do you harvest Irish moss?
No. It doesn't grow around here. There's one that we think is similar to Irish moss. It looks like a dark green, fuzzy antlers. And it grows like these little fingers. And it just grows in like a cabbage formation. We have cut it before and dried it. It was an intensive drying process. It took about 3 days, and it did turn white. But it's really gooey when you cut it. You get all this green goo everywhere. So we don't harvest it on a regular basis. Yes? You could use a dehydrator if you had a small batch of your own. Yes, I've known people who have dried it in the dehydrator. Nope, you don't even need to rinse it. We do rinse the nori in the ocean water because it does, it grows on the rocks where the sand is. It's the only one that grows near the sand. So it gets snails on it, it gets sand on it. And we used to rinse it in fresh water inland, and it would turn it this like really light pink. So it was rinsing off all the minerals. So we rinse it in the ocean now before we bring it in. And you could probably still find a little bit of sand in the bottom of the bags. It's the only one, though, that you'll find that. Yes?
You have a cookbook for vegetable?
I do. I have one that just printed, self-printed. It's a cookbooklet. I don't know if I have any more copies downstairs. I think I might be out, but if I'm out and you let me know your name, I could always send you one. Yes? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could probably use a hijiki or arame. I know arame is raw. I don't know if hijiki is raw. You might have to experiment to see if that one is raw. Or, investigate. Yes? Kombu. Kombu. We also harvest 2 seaweeds that nobody else in the world harvests, and they're both downstairs. There's one called ocean ribbons. It's a lot like a linguine noodle. It's the one that I told you the stipes and the holdfast live for up to 17 years. Of course, they get new blades every year. And the other one is called sweet kombu. It grows like a cabbage, and it has these little bubbles on the top of it that are high in polysaccharides. It's delicious out in the ocean. It's a wonderful breakfast. It's also really good dried. If you dry it really crispy, you can get it to be like a chip. Yes?
Could you explain what you said you don't cut off
Okay, I can tell you the taxonomy of seaweed. The holdfast is like the roots, but it doesn't have a root. It actually holds onto the rock. And you can try to pull it off, it doesn't come off. Some of the storms will get it off. We haven't had any storms, that's why you don't see a lot of seaweed up on the beach yet. But as soon as we do, all of the older holdfasts and stipes will be up there. Then the next part is called the stipe. That's like the stem of a land plant. And you don't want to cut the stipe. If you cut the stipe, you've killed the plant. And then the last part are the blades. So we blade tip or frond tip harvest. And we don't cut the whole blade, we cut, as much as we think we'll be able to reproduce. And for example, the sea palm, if you leave some of the blade on there, you can go back and harvest that same plant again because it grows that fast. It grows probably in 4 weeks, it grows into brand new blades that you can harvest again.
And how big is the blades?
It depends. The kombu, the blades are about this long, and they dry up to about that long. The wakame can be from here to that window. They're the longest. They have a rib in the middle. The sea palm, the blade is about that big, and we cut about that much. Yeah, not very much.
So you don't have to get into, they dry up that.
They dry up to this size, and then when they rehydrate, they dehydrate to 1/10 of their size. Oh, there it is. And that big thing down at the bottom, that's the holdfast. It kind of looks like brains. And the stipes, you can see the stems, and then you'll see why they're called sea palm, because they look like palm trees in the ocean. Well, thank you so much. Yes, another question. Why aren't some of them? Well, they're just harder to eat. Yeah, like the kombu is a little difficult to eat. I don't know of anybody that makes a raw dish with kombu. The nori is pretty easy to eat raw, but you have to like the taste. Because it's so high in protein, it has more of a fishy taste. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.